Hello, my name is Louis Marandola, and this is my course project for the class Environmental Issues EVPC 20104, Coral Reef Biodiversity Loss. Coral reef biodiversity loss affects most aspects of life that depend on them. They are home to 25% of all marine life. Think about that. 1/4 of the organisms that live in the ocean depend on coral reefs. Known as the rainforests of the sea, they produce 50% of the atmospheric oxygen that we breathe, meaning every other breath we take comes from the ocean and coral reefs. We rarely experience how ferocious the ocean waves can be because the reefs provide protection to coastal communities from storm surges and large waves. Also known as the medicine cabinets of the ocean, they provide compounds needed to fight cancer, arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, and much more. They generate an estimated $36 billion a year through tourism alone. And that's just scratching the surface of how important these reefs are. In 2050, it's projected that 90% of the reefs in the world will die. The coastal fishing industries would collapse, and the money generated from coastal tourism would diminish significantly. How this connects to biodiversity loss. As stated previously, the ongoing issue with coral reef mortality and biodiversity loss go hand in hand. So many lives depend on these reefs in order to make a living and simply survive. The topic of biodiversity loss means a reduction of the variety of life within a certain ecosystem. According to the United Nations, around 1 billion people depend on coral reefs for their food and livelihoods worldwide. Some factors that contribute to the biodiversity loss are overfishing, destructive fishing practices, climate change, and pollution. Overfishing and destructive fishing practices such as trawling and blast fishing, or fish bombing, decimate reefs, leaving little to nothing in their wake. Overfishing depletes reefs of algae feeding fish that clean the reef of harmful algae that, left unchecked, ultimately suffocate and kill the reef. Trawling and blast fishing destroy reefs and fish without prejudice. Trawlers drag large metal equipment on the seafloor, flattening and plowing through anything and everything in their path. The blast radius from the bombs used in blast fishing decimate and shred whatever is unlucky enough to escape the blast radius. Climate change is the main contributor to the leading cause of death for corals, known as bleaching. And pollution suffocates reefs by robbing the reef itself and the helpful organisms around it of essential nutrients and energy needed to perform their duties. My target audience is the younger generation and the younger scientific minds that are geared towards improving upon and bolstering the already in place methods to help preserve and rehabilitate coral reefs. The younger generation is the future, and they always make a bigger splash. Pun intended. We need these young men and women to put their minds together in order to devise new ways to save the reefs, whether it be new forms of artificial reefs, new policies, better management of marine protected areas, or even just ways to help and revitalize struggling reefs. This is my social ecological framework model. which includes the environmental factors, or the ecological factors, and the human factors, or the anthropogenic factors. As you can see in one of the previous slides on how this topic connects to biodiversity loss, all four of those topics are included in the human category of factors. It's interesting to see. Many organizations, big and small, have been working on trying to devise plans and policies to restore, rehabilitate, and preserve our reefs. Larger organizations include the Environmental Protection Agency, the World Wildlife Foundation, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and the United Nations Environmental Program. Many of these organizations draw inspiration from and follow suit in accordance with the Clean Water Act of 1972. This act enforced national water quality standards, restricting pollution, investing in wastewater treatment, and better wetland management. Even smaller organizations have also been hard at work conducting their own practices that have produced some positive results. USAID is one of the world's premier international development agencies and has made great strides in the fight against climate change. It partners with more than 45 countries to enact emissions reduction, protect vital ecosystems, make easy transitions to renewable energy, among other things. They have an ongoing mission in the Seychelles Islands. Their activities in this mission include harvesting small, healthy sections of coral that survived the 1998 bleaching event, having them reproduce and then deploying them to the degraded areas once grown to the appropriate size, and then observing the difference between these areas and the control areas. They train stakeholders on the principles of reef restoration, how to build mid-water nurseries, and transplanting corals to the degraded areas. They also implemented healthy practices when conducting these methods, such as working at a meaningful scale, thoughtful project site selection, and allowing adequate time for assessment. They have also expanded EBA, or Ecosystem-Based Adaptation application, through targeted private sector engagement. They promote knowledge transfer through strong communication efforts. They support relevant policy processes, and they've developed a business model to support the sustainability of restoration efforts. Do I think these methods work? I believe that these practices have proven to work quite well. The rate at which each method is implemented is key. USAID has taken into consideration that although they are trying to help, they also need to give the reefs the safest and variable-free areas to make a comeback, as well as give the reefs themselves time to adapt to the help that they are receiving. For my swag option, I wanted my swag product to symbolize not just the biodiversity loss, but also how the quality of life around these dying reefs change from when it was healthy and after it dies. My thinking was that a sort of music festival that not only entertains but also educates on coral reefs and their benefits to the earth, promotes cleaner and more efficient means of living in communities and reef-dependent areas and industries, and just a general emphasis that everyone on planet Earth needs coral reefs in some capacity to keep living as we know it today. My plan would be to gather local artists and any bigger artists willing enough to participate who have had history of at least promoting some form of concern for the ocean, as well as bands and artists that have names pertaining to coral reefs in some way, just for fun. For the education aspect of this festival, I would have various workshops or discussions one can attend that all speak on different aspects of corals and their importance and their current predicament. So, for example, there would be a workshop on possible solutions or policies that could be enacted in order to put a more controlled hand on coral and human interaction. Another workshop would be on bleaching and why it's so scary seeing the numbers we are seeing when we look at how much the ocean has been warming up due to climate change. At the end of the festival, each workshop would nominate one representative, and there will be a panel of sorts where they all get together and come up with a mock action plan for coral safety moving forward. And possibly they would submit that draft to policymakers like the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and the UNEP, or the United Nations Environmental Program, or even Congress. Some backing from environmental organizations that support the ocean, coral reefs, or just the environment would also be necessary. Organizations don't have to necessarily be pertaining to the ocean or coral reefs. They could also promote the protection of the rainforests, because many of the stressors that the rainforests are facing are also affecting coral reefs. Future directions. In terms of research topics, my future directions would definitely be the MPA, or Marine Protected Area policies regarding coral reefs. How coral reefs can make a comeback in this ever-warming climate, and even what efforts have been most effective in the rehabilitation and conservation of reefs. One particular research question that interests me is, what does the northern species of coral do to survive the warming climate that we can learn from in order to help the coral's tropical cousins? I have an endless curiosity when it comes to my passions, and coral reefs are no different. I want to learn all that I can from wherever I can, so that I can be as prepared as possible for any form of job involving research and/or education as I can be. Ultimately, any research I conduct will contribute to my Unity capstone and hopefully help me become educated enough to make a piece of writing good enough to get noticed by any of the passionate organizations who pursue the longevity of coral reefs. The Unity courses that I am excited for are any and all that allow me to further my research and knowledge. Like I said, I want to learn as much as I can in order to be prepared for the future of coral reefs. A job that I would like to have one day would be a research position at the New England Aquarium or any marine science museum or organization where I can research specifically the northern species of coral, but coral reefs in general, and/or educate the public on what wonderful organisms they are and why we need them to be saved. Thank you for listening.